She had his father's hand in hers when he walked in. That was the first thing Kwon Jae-won saw. A woman he had never met. Dark skin glowing under the yellow light of a market stall. Her coat wrapped around his father's shoulders like she had known the old man her entire life. And his father, the man who hadn't smiled genuinely in 3 years, was smiling. Jae-won stood in the rain and felt something he hadn't felt since his mother died. He didn't know what to call it. He only knew it frightened him more than any enemy ever had. His lieutenant touched his arm. "Boss, should we move in?" He said nothing for a long moment. "No," he finally answered. "Not yet." That pause. That single, quiet pause from a man who had never hesitated a day in his life. That was where everything began to unravel. Welcome to Afro-K Romance Fairy Tale. On today's episode, you get a dose of betrayal, power, romance, love, unexpected encounters, and a beautiful beginning. If this is your first time here, make sure to like, subscribe, click the notification icon to get a reminder when new amazing stories drop, and send the story to friends and family who you think would love to watch it. And also tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I'd really love to know. Now let's dive back into this amazing story. Chisholm Olivia had stopped believing in signs a long time ago. Signs were for people whose lives had margins, space for meaning, space for mystery. Her life had no margins. It had rent deadlines and a visa countdown, and a mother in Enugu who called every Sunday believing her daughter was thriving in Seoul. She was not thriving, but she was surviving. And on most days, she had convinced herself that was enough. The market at Mangwon-dong was quiet on Tuesday mornings. Most serious buyers came on weekends. Tuesdays were for the elderly locals who walked slowly and touched everything, and bought almost nothing. Chisholm didn't mind. She had learned to find peace in the slow hours. She arranged her beaded necklaces, her Kent print purses, her hand-stitched wristbands, and she let her mind drift back to Enugu, to her mother's kitchen, to the smell of Audrey and Uziza leaves and the way safety used to feel like something she actually owned. She was mid-thought when she heard the sound. Not a crash. Not a scream. Just a soft, wet thud. The sound of something heavy giving up against the ground. She turned. He was already on his knees. An old man. Thin. His gray hair plastered flat against his forehead by the rain. His jacket was completely soaked through, the kind of soaked that told you he had been outside for hours. His hands were pressed against the wet pavement, trembling. Not from cold alone. From something deeper. Something that had been wearing him down long before the rain. Chisholm didn't think. She moved. She was around the stall table, and beside him before the woman at the next stall had even looked up. She got her arm beneath his and lifted slowly, speaking softly. "Easy. Easy. I have you." In English first, then in Igbo, because Igbo had always been the language her body reached for when her heart was the one doing the talking. He looked up at her. His eyes were dark brown and very old and swimming with a confusion so deep it looked like grief. He said something in Korean. She didn't understand. He said it again, softer, almost to himself, and in it she caught one word that he repeated like a prayer. Jae-won. Jae-won. "It's okay," she told him, though she didn't know if it was. "You're okay." She got him onto the wooden bench beside her stall. She pulled her coat off her own back, her only coat, the caramel brown one she had bought secondhand from Dongmyo Market her first winter here, and she wrapped it around him without thinking twice. She sent the young boy who helped with her stall running to the Pojangmaka across the street for hot sundabujigi. She found the leather card tucked inside his inner jacket pocket. Kwon Hwan-gil, 73, and she photographed it with her phone, unsure what else to do, unsure who to call. She didn't call anyone yet. Instead, she sat beside him and held his hand. His grip was stronger than she expected. Like he was afraid that if he let go, she would dissolve. She let him hold on. She didn't know why she felt that this old man needed that more than he needed a phone call. She just felt it. And Chisholm Olivia, despite everything Seoul had quietly done to her spirit, had not yet lost the ability to feel another person's need and respond to it without calculation. That gift, the one her mother had called Obioma, a good heart, was the same gift that was about to change the entire course of her life. Because two things were happening that she could not see. The first, Kwon Hwan-gil was not simply a lost old man. He was the most carefully protected civilian in Seoul's underworld. A man whose safety was the single condition under which his son conducted all business, made all decisions, and maintained every alliance. The second, the two men who had been searching the Mangwon-dong area for the last 4 hours had just rounded the corner, spotted the old man, spotted her, and immediately reached for their phones. The call lasted 11 seconds. That was all it took. 11 seconds for a lieutenant named Park Sung-jin to relay the location, confirm the old man was alive, and describe the woman sitting beside him. 11 seconds for the information to travel from a rain-soaked street in Mangwon-dong to a glass-walled office on the 43rd floor of a building in Gangnam that officially belonged to a logistics company and unofficially belonged to no law enforcement database on the peninsula. Kwon Jae-won was mid-signature on a document worth $80 million when the call came. He stopped signing. "Say that again," he said quietly. Park repeated himself, word for word. Jae-won set the pen down. He stood. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked out at Seoul's skyline, gray and glittering in the November rain, and he felt something loosen in his chest that he had kept locked for 3 years. Since his father's diagnosis. Since the doctors first used the word dementia in a sentence, and his entire carefully constructed world shifted 2 degrees off its axis. "Is he hurt?" he asked. "No, sir. He appears well. The woman has. She's given him her coat. She bought him food. She's sitting with him." Another silence. "Who is she?" "Nigerian national. Name is Chisholm Olivia. Market vendor. Itaewon residential address. Student visa, expiring in." That's enough. His voice was flat. Unreadable. The voice his people had learned never to push against. "Don't approach her. Don't speak to her. I'm coming myself." He ended the call, picked his jacket from the back of a chair, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Kwon Jae-won left a meeting unfinished. Chisholm had no idea she was being watched. She was focused entirely on the old man, on keeping him warm, keeping him calm, making sure the soup didn't go cold before he finished it. He ate slowly, carefully, the way very old people eat when someone is watching over them with patience. Between spoonfuls, he would look at her. Long, studying looks that made her feel both seen and slightly unnerved. Then he said something. Korean again. But this time he reached out with one trembling hand and touched her face. Her cheek. Gently. The way a grandfather touches a child he loves. His eyes filled. He said the words again, softer. Chisholm felt her own throat tighten. She didn't know what he was saying, but she understood what it felt like. That touch carried a whole history of missing someone. She recognized it because she carried the same history. Her father had been gone 4 years now, a sudden cardiac arrest on a Wednesday morning that nobody had predicted and nobody had been home to witness. She still hadn't fully put that weight down. "I don't know what you're saying," she whispered. "But I hear you." He smiled. Small, tired, real. She was still holding his hand when a black car pulled up. She noticed it the way you notice something that doesn't match. Too quiet, too deliberate, too expensive for this street. The doors opened, and 2 large men in dark coats stepped out first. They didn't look around the way normal people do. They looked around the way people do when they already know exactly what they're looking for. Chisholm straightened. Then the 3rd door opened. And the man who stepped out of it was not what she expected. She had braced herself for someone old. For another family member of similar age. Someone frantic with worry. Someone who would rush forward with relief. She had not braced herself for a man who looked like that. He was tall, lean in a way that suggested discipline rather than nature. His dark coat fell perfectly from his shoulders. His jaw was sharp enough to cut something. His eyes, even from this distance, even in the gray November light, were intense in a way that had nothing to do with the rain. He walked without hurry. That was the thing that struck her first. While his men moved with urgency, he moved like the world around him had agreed to wait. He was looking at his father. And then he looked at her. And for 3 full seconds, 3 seconds that felt structurally different from normal time, he simply looked. Chisholm did not look away. She didn't know why. Some part of her that was older and braver than her circumstances lifted her chin and held his gaze and refused to be the first one to break it. He broke it. He crossed the remaining distance between them and crouched down in front of his father, and the transformation was instant and devastating. The controlled, unreadable man disappeared completely. What replaced him was a son. Just a son. His hands went to the old man's face. Careful, trembling slightly in a way Chisholm doubted he was aware of. And he spoke in Korean, low and urgent, and cracked at the edges. The old man laughed softly, patted his son's hand, said something that made the tall man close his eyes for just a moment. Chisholm watched this and felt the specific ache of witnessing someone else's love. The beautiful pain of seeing what she no longer had. When he stood and turned to her, his face was composed again. But his eyes weren't. Not entirely. "You stayed with him," he said. His English was precise. Accented. Each word placed like it had been thought about. "He needed someone too," she said simply. Something moved across his face. Too fast to name. "How long?" Almost 3 hours. He was quiet for a moment. Then, and she would think about this later, turning it over and over in the dark of her apartment. He looked at her like she had done something he genuinely could not compute. Like kindness, offered freely, and without transaction, was a language he had encountered before, but never learned to speak. "Thank you," he said. 2 words. Simple. But the way he said them, like they cost him something, made them land differently than thank yous usually did. She nodded, started to pull her coat back from the old man's shoulders. "Keep it," said J1. She stopped. "Excuse me?" "He's still cold. Keep it on him until he's in the car." It wasn't a request. It wasn't quite a command either. It was something in between, the tone of a man who was accustomed to directing the world around him, but was, in this specific moment, trying to remember how to be human about it. Chisholm looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the old man, who was watching both of them with bright, knowing eyes that seemed far clearer than they had been an hour ago. She left the coat on him. J1's men helped his father gently into the car. J1 stood on the pavement, hands in his coat pockets. He looked at Chisholm one more time. His gaze moved, briefly, quickly, across her face, her braids, the stall behind her, her bare arms in the cold now that her coat was gone. Something tightened in his jaw. He reached into his inner pocket and produced a card. Plain. Black. Nothing on it but a number. "If you need anything," he said, "call that." She took the card. Looked at it. Looked at him. "I won't need anything," she said. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. But close. "Keep it anyway." He got in the car. The doors closed. The vehicle pulled away. Chisholm stood on the wet pavement in the November cold, holding a black card and wearing no coat, watching the tail lights disappear around the corner. She looked down at the card again. No name. Just a number. She should have thrown it away. She knew, standing there with the rain beginning again, that she should have dropped it into the first bin she passed and gone back to her stall, and let that be the end of a strange afternoon. She put it in her pocket instead. She told herself she kept the card because it was polite. That was the story she gave herself walking home that evening, her arms wrapped tight around her body against the cold, the space where her coat used to be feeling like an absence with a shape. She kept it because throwing it away felt rude. Because the man had been grateful, and she didn't want to disrespect that. Because it meant nothing. Because she would never call it. She made pepper soup that night, and ate it alone, and did not think about the way he had looked at her. She did not think about it the next morning either. Or the morning after that. On the 4th day, her landlord called. 3 months arrears. Pay by Friday, or the locks change Saturday morning. She sat on the edge of her bed after the call ended, and looked at the wall and did not cry because she had already decided, somewhere in the geography of her grief, that Sol would not get her tears. Sol had taken enough. She opened her purse. She found the card before she found her calculator. She stared at it for a long time. Then she put it face down on the nightstand and called her friend at ease instead, who listened patiently, and then said with the blunt love of a true Igbo woman, "Chisholm, call the man. You kept the card for a reason. Stop forming strong." She didn't call that night. But the next morning, Friday, the last morning before the locks, she picked up the phone. It rang once. Just once. "I wasn't sure you'd call," said the voice on the other end. She felt her grip tighten on the phone. He had saved her number. In 4 days he had not deleted it, which meant at some point he had looked at it. She didn't know what to do with that information, so she set it aside. "I have a situation," she said. Straight. No decoration. She had not survived this long in Seoul by performing helplessness. "Tell me." So she did. Briefly. Clinically. 3 months rent arrears. Friday deadline. She stated the number. She did not apologize for it or frame it softly. Silence on his end. Not a long silence, but the kind that had texture. "Send me your account details," he said. "I'm not asking for a gift," she said quickly. "I'll pay it back. Every one. I just need." Chisholm. The way he said her name stopped her completely. He said it like he had practiced it. Like he had been turning it over quietly for 4 days the same way she had been turning over his card. "Send me the details," he repeated. Quieter this time. She sent them. Within 20 minutes her account showed a transfer that covered not just 3 months arrears, but 6. She stared at the screen. Called him back immediately. "That's too much," she said. "Consider the extra 3 months a security margin," he said. "So you don't have to make this call again under pressure. I told you I'll pay it back. I know you will." A pause. "That's not why I sent it." Her heart did something complicated. "Then why?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. When he did, it was with a question she hadn't expected. How are your arms? You were cold. When we left. She blinked, stood in the middle of her small kitchen, and blinked. My arms are fine, she said softly. Good. Another pause. The kind of pause that felt like something being decided. My father keeps asking about you. She didn't know what to say to that. He describes you. J1 continued. Your braids. Your voice. He says you spoke to him in a language he didn't know and it made him feel safe. A beat. He hasn't felt safe outside the house in 2 years. Chisholm pressed her fingers to her mouth. He's a sweet man, she whispered. He wants to see you again. The words came carefully. I told him I would ask. I'm asking. The question beneath the question was loud enough to fill her entire apartment. She should have said no. A woman in her position. Visa nearly expired. No leverage, no safety net. Had no business stepping closer to whatever this was. She could feel it even through a phone call. The immense gravity of this man. The way the world seemed to reorganize itself around him. Getting closer to that kind of gravity when you were already standing on uncertain ground was not survival. It was something else entirely. When, she heard herself say. The restaurant was not what she expected. She had imagined somewhere cold and architectural. The kind of place designed to remind you of the distance between yourself and the person sitting across from you. Instead, J1's driver took her to a small, warm, private room in a traditional Hanok restaurant in Buckshin, the kind of place where the walls were made of hanji paper, and the floor was heated, and the food arrived like someone's grandmother had made it specifically for you. Juan Gil was already seated when she walked in. He saw her, and his whole face opened up. He said her name, her actual name, Chisholm, perfectly pronounced, which meant J1 had taught it to him, and reached both hands out across the table. She crossed the room, and took them, and felt immediately, overwhelmingly, like she was going to cry in a way she absolutely refused to do. He's been talking about this all week, said J1 from behind her. She turned. He was standing near the doorway. He had exchanged the dark coat for something simpler. Dark trousers, a charcoal sweater, nothing on his wrists. He looked less like a man who owned things, and more like a man who was trying to remember what it felt like not to. She noticed the exhaustion around his eyes. The kind that doesn't come from one bad night, but from years of sleeping lightly. You look different, she said, before she could stop herself. His expression shifted. Different how? Less. She searched for the word. Armored. He was quiet for a moment. Then, and this one she caught fully the whole thing. He smiled. Small. Real. Like it had escaped without permission. It did considerable damage. They ate together, the three of them, and it was the strangest and most unexpectedly warm 2 hours of Chisholm's year. Juan Gil told stories. J1 translating in low, patient tones beside her, about his wife, who had died 6 years ago, about a small fishing town on the south coast where he grew up, about the first time he saw snow and thought the sky was coming apart. Chisholm told him about Nugu, about her mother's kitchen, about the way her father used to dance badly to Oliver de Coke records on Saturday mornings and not care who was watching. J1 translated everything she said with the same careful attention. But twice. She counted, because she noticed. Twice he added something after her words. Something small. Something Juan Gil responded to with a glance at his son that carried 30 years of parental knowing. She wanted to ask what he had added. She didn't. But she thought about it. What she didn't know, what she couldn't see from inside the warmth of that Hanok room, was what was happening outside it. Park Sung-jin was on a call in the parking lot. The person on the other end of that call was not a friend of J1's. And what he was reporting, in careful, quiet detail, had nothing to do with loyalty. Someone was already watching Chisholm, Olivia. And it wasn't J1. If you're still here, and your heart is already invested in Chisholm and J1, drop a comment right now and tell me, are you Team Chisholm, or are you already falling for J1? And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now because part 4 is where everything catches fire. Don't miss it. She started looking forward to Tuesdays. That was how she knew she was in trouble. Not the big, dramatic kind of trouble that announces itself loudly. The quiet kind. The kind that moves in slowly, rearranges your furniture while you sleep, and by the time you notice, it already feels like home. Every Tuesday, J1's driver, a quiet, broad-shouldered man named Do-hyun who never smiled, but always opened her door first, would appear at her market stall at exactly noon. There was never a call beforehand. Never a message. Just Do-hyun, punctual as weather, standing at the edge of her stall with that same unreadable expression, and Chisholm would pack up her things with hands that were steadier than her heartbeat, and get into the car. They always went to Juan Gil first. That part she understood. That part had rules and boundaries, and a shape she could trace with her finger. The old man was the reason. The old man was safe, sitting with Juan Gil, listening to his stories, holding his papery hands while J1 translated. That was charity extended, gratitude honored, nothing more complicated than human decency sustaining itself across a language barrier. That was what she told herself. What she could not tell herself, no matter how many versions of the story she tried, was that the part she looked forward to most was not Juan Gil. It was the 40 minutes after, when Juan Gil tired, and he always tired around 3 o'clock, his eyelids growing heavy mid-sentence. J1 would walk Chisholm out, and instead of sending her straight to the car, he would walk with her, around the block, through whatever street was nearest. Never far, never long. But those 40 minutes had become the most honest part of her week. He asked her questions nobody in Seoul had thought to ask her. What did she miss most about Nigeria? What her textile designs actually meant to her, not as a career, but as a language. Whether she believed in God still, or whether distance and difficulty had rearranged that too. He asked with the focused attention of someone who was genuinely building something, not performing interest, not filling silence, building an actual architecture of who she was, brick by careful brick. And she asked him things back. She had decided early that she would not be the only one answering. If he wanted to know her, she would know him equally. What do you actually feel? She asked him one Tuesday, 3 weeks in, the two of them walking along the Han River embankment with the winter sun low and pale above the water. When you walk into a room, and everyone in it is afraid of you? He walked 4 steps before answering. Tired, he said. She looked at him. I have felt powerful exactly once, he said. The first year. When I was young enough to confuse fear with respect. He paused. Now I just feel the weight of it. Everyone performing around me. Nobody real. He glanced at her sideways. Until recently. She looked away at the river. Her heart was doing the thing again. The complicated thing. The thing she had no framework for because she had not built any walls against the specific kind of tenderness. The kind that came dressed as honesty. J1, she said carefully. I know, he said quietly. I don't think you do. I know what you're going to say. His voice was low. Even. That this is complicated. That your visa situation makes you vulnerable. That the distance between my world and yours is not romantic. It's dangerous. He stopped walking. Turned to face her fully. I know I'll love it, Chisholm. She stopped too. He was close enough that she could see the tiredness in his eyes up close. The real kind. The kind that had nothing to do with sleep. Then why do you keep showing up? She asked. He looked at her for a long moment. Because everything else in my life makes sense, he said. And you don't. And I've been surrounded by things that make sense for so long that I've forgotten what it felt like to want to understand something. The wind off the river moved through her braids. She wanted to say something sharp. Something that would create necessary distance. She had always been good at necessary distance. It was practically a survival skill at this point. She said nothing. And he reached up. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to step back, and tucked a loose braid behind her ear. Just that. Nothing more. The back of his fingers against her cheekbone for half a second. She felt it everywhere. She should have gone home that evening, and been afraid. Instead she went home, and was something worse than afraid. She was hopeful. And hope, for a woman in Chisholm Olivia's position, was the most dangerous currency there was. It made you spend money you didn't have. It made you reach for things that were not safely within reach. It made you forget, temporarily, that the ground beneath you had an expiry date. Her visa renewal application had been denied. The email had arrived that morning. She had read it standing in her kitchen before Do-hyun came, and she had read it 3 times to make sure she understood all the implications, and then she had put her phone face down on the counter, and finished getting dressed because falling apart was not on Tuesday's schedule. She had not told J1. She did not know why. Or perhaps she knew exactly why and didn't want to examine it, because telling him meant watching him try to fix it, and watching him try to fix it meant owing him something larger than 6 months' rent, something she had no currency to repay. What she didn't know was that J1 already knew. He had known since Monday morning. Park Sung-jin had flagged it, pulling strings through channels that were not legal and not discussable, monitoring her immigration status with the quiet thoroughness of someone following instructions. J1 had read the report at his desk and sat very still for a very long time. He had not told her either. He was trying to decide how much of what he felt for her was something he had a right to act on. He was trying to decide whether protecting her was love or possession, and whether, in his specific hands, those two things had ever truly been different. He was still deciding when his phone rang. Not his regular phone. The other one. The one with no contacts saved. The one that only rang when something had already gone very wrong. He answered. "We have a problem," said the voice on the other end. It was not Park Sung-jin. Jae-won's jaw tightened. "What kind?" "The Nigerian girl. Someone has been asking about her. Not immigration. Not police." A pause that carried the specific weight of bad news being measured before delivery. "Kwon, it's the Seo faction." The Seo faction. 3 words that rearranged the temperature of the entire conversation. The Seo family were the one wound in Jae-won's empire that had never fully closed. A rival network with deep roots and longer memories, and a particular talent for identifying what a man valued most and applying pressure there. They had tried money. They had tried territory disputes. They had tried political leverage. Now they had found something better. They had found Chisholm. Jae-won stood at his window for the second time in 4 weeks and looked out at Seoul's skyline. But this time the loosening in his chest was not warmth. It was the cold, specific recognition of a man who understood exactly how this worked, who had, in other circumstances, used exactly this method himself. Find what someone loves. Make it dangerous. Watch them make mistakes. He had let her become visible. That was his error. His first in years. And unlike his other errors, the ones made in boardrooms and back rooms and across negotiating tables, this one had a face he recognized. Braids he had touched. A voice that asked him real questions. He called Park Sung-jin. The call lasted 4 minutes. By the end of it, 2 things had been set in motion. The first was a security detail. Unmarked, discreet, rotating, assigned to Chisholm's building and market stall effective immediately. The second was an internal investigation into Park Sung-jin himself, because Jae-won had said nothing to Park about the Seo faction's interest, and yet somehow the Seo faction had known which woman to find. The only person who could have told them was someone already inside. Someone close. Jae-won ended the call, picked up his jacket, stopped at the door. He stood there for a moment. A man who had built an empire on never letting anyone close enough to be weaponized. A man had watched everything he loved become a liability. His mother, his father's health, and now this woman who kept used coat strangers warm in the rain and spoke Igbo to men who couldn't understand it because she knew the sound of care was its own language. He had tried, for 4 weeks, to stay on the right side of the line between protecting her and wanting her. He was no longer sure that line existed. He walked out. What he didn't know, the open wound the story had not yet turned over, was that Chisholm had seen something that Tuesday evening she had not mentioned. As Do-hyun drove her home, she had looked out the rear window and noticed a car. Dark. Parked badly. The kind of parking that happened when someone stopped suddenly because they needed to watch something rather than because they needed to stop. She had noticed. She had said nothing. But she had taken a photograph through the rear glass, blurry and half-dark, and she had looked at it alone in her apartment. And then she had looked at Jae-won's black card on her nightstand. And she had begun, quietly and with great reluctance, to understand that the world she had stepped into was not simply complicated. It was hunting her. She called him at midnight. Not from fear. Chisholm Olivia did not call people from fear. She called from the cold, clear place she went to when the situation had moved beyond emotion into decision. The same place she had gone when her father died, when her scholarship collapsed, when the landlord called. The place where she stopped feeling and started thinking. "I need to see you," she said when he picked up. "Not Tuesday. Tomorrow." A pause. "Are you safe right now?" His voice was different at midnight. Lower. The professional composure stripped back to something rawer underneath. "I'm inside," she said. "But Jae-won," she stopped. It was the first time she had said his name like that. Without formality. Without the small, deliberate distance she had been maintaining like a woman tending a fire she refused to let grow. She heard him hear it. "I'll come to you," he said immediately. "No." She was already shaking her head. "Not here. Not my building. I don't know who's watching." Another pause. Longer. And in that pause she heard the thing she had been half suspecting. The fractional hesitation of a man who already knew the answer to a question she hadn't asked yet. "You know something," she said quietly. No denial. That was what undid her. Not a lie. Not a deflection. Just silence that confirmed everything. "Tomorrow," he said. 10 o'clock. Do-hyun will take you somewhere safe. I'll explain everything. You'll explain everything tonight, she said. On this call. Right now. Or I walk, Jae-won. I pack what I can carry, and I find my own way out of whatever this is, and you never hear from me again. She meant it. He knew she meant it. The specific quality of her stillness, even through a phone, even at midnight, was not performance. It was the actual architecture of who she was. He exhaled. And then he told her. The Seo faction. The surveillance. Park Sung-jin's suspected betrayal. The security detail he had placed on her building that evening. All of it. He told her with the flat, unornamented precision of a man who had decided, sometime in the last 4 weeks, that this woman deserved the truth even when the truth was ugly. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, the silence between them had weight. "How long have you known?" she asked. "Since Monday. And you sat across from me today and said nothing. I was trying to determine the safest way to. You were trying to protect me without telling me I needed protecting," she said. "Not with anger. With something quieter and more cutting than anger. Which means you made a decision about what I could handle. Without asking me. Chisholm. I have been handling things you cannot imagine," she said, "for my entire life. Alone. Without anyone deciding in advance what I was strong enough to know." Her voice was steady, but something in it was breaking, and they both knew it. "Don't do that to me. Whatever this is between us, don't do that." The silence that followed was the longest one yet. "You're right," he said. Just that. No qualification. No defense. 2 words from a man who she suspected had not said them easily to anyone in years. Something in her chest cracked open. She sat down on her bed in the dark. "I'm scared," she admitted. Quietly. The words cost her something real. "I don't say that easily. I know you don't. I don't want to leave Seoul," she said. And beneath that sentence was the one she didn't say. "I don't want to leave this. I don't want to leave you." She thought he heard it anyway. "You're not leaving Seoul," he said. Firm. Certain. The voice that didn't negotiate. But underneath the firmness was something else. Something that sounded almost desperate in its certainty. Like a man making a promise to himself as much as to her. "I will not let anything happen to you." "That's not a small thing to promise," she whispered. "No," he agreed. "It isn't." She met him the next morning at a small private residence in Songbuk-dong. Not his main property, somewhere quieter, tucked behind a garden wall with persimmon trees going bare in the November cold. Do-hyun drove her in silence. She watched Seoul move past the window and tried to locate her own heartbeat inside all the noise of the last 12 hours. Jae-won was waiting outside when the car pulled up. No coat this time. Just a dark sweater against the cold morning, hands in his pockets, watching her door before the car had fully stopped. She stepped out and they stood 4 feet apart on a quiet garden path and looked at each other in the full morning light for the first time without a restaurant table or a market stall or his father's presence providing the architecture of the moment. Just them. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said. "I didn't," he said. "Neither did I." He studied her face. The careful way he did it. Like he was checking for damage, like her face was something he had assigned himself the responsibility of keeping whole, made her throat tighten. "Come inside," he said softly. They sat in a small warm room with hangy screens and low furniture, and tea that appeared without either of them asking for it. The whole house had the quality of somewhere deliberately peaceful, like someone had built it as an antidote to everything outside its walls. "My mother designed this room," he said, following her eyes. "She said every person who ran toward power needed one place that ran away from it." Chisholm looked at him. "She sounds like she was remarkable. She was the only person who was never afraid of me," he said. "And the only one I was ever fully afraid of disappointing." The grief in his voice was old and well-worn and very present. "She would have liked you," he said. It came out quietly, like he hadn't fully planned to say it. Chisholm felt the full weight of those words settle over her. She understood what they cost a man like him. She understood that saying she would have liked you was the closest he had yet come to saying the larger thing beneath it. She set her tea down. Jae-won. She said his name the way she had the night before. Unguarded. "What are we doing?" He looked at her steadily. "I think you know. I want to hear you say it." Something moved through his expression. Across his jaw. Behind his eyes. The full complexity of a man who had spent years ensuring that nothing he felt was ever legible, trying to make himself legible for one specific person. "I am trying," he said slowly, "to figure out how to be someone worthy of being in your life. Given everything that my life is." He paused. "I haven't worked that out yet. But I know that the alternative. The version where I step back and keep you at a safe distance and watch you from a careful remove. I tried that for 4 weeks. His eyes didn't move from hers. "I can't do it." The persimmon trees outside the hangy screen moved in the winter wind. Chisholm looked at this man. This dangerous, exhausted, unexpectedly tender man had taught his dementia-stricken father to say her name correctly, who had told her the truth at midnight when lying would have been easier, who stood in the rain watching her hold his father's hand, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. And she made a decision. She crossed the small distance between them. She placed her hand against his jaw, deliberate, unhurried, the same way he had touched her cheek by the river, and she felt him go completely still beneath her palm. like every carefully maintained composure in him had simultaneously exhaled. Then don't, she said softly. He covered her hand with his. Both of his hands. Held it there against his face like it was something he intended to keep. Your visa, he said. Low. I want to help. Legitimately. There's a cultural exchange arts program. Your textile work qualifies. I had my legal team look into it when he stopped. She raised an eyebrow. When? When I realized I wasn't ready for you to have a reason to leave. She laughed. Softly. Genuinely. The kind of laugh that only comes when something hurts and feels like relief at the same time. You are so much work, she told him. I know, he said, and smiled. The full one this time. The one that had no strategy in it. It was devastating. But here is what neither of them knew. Sitting in that quiet room with their hands still finding each other, and the persimmon trees moving cold outside the screen. Park Sung-jin was not working alone. The person who had commissioned him, the person who had been feeding information about Chisholm to the CO faction since the very first Tuesday, was not an enemy from outside Jaewon's empire. It was someone inside his innermost circle. Someone who had watched him walk away from that $80 million meeting 4 weeks ago and understood, immediately, what that meant. Someone who had decided that a woman from Enugu with braids and a coat and a good heart was the most dangerous thing to ever enter Kwon Jae-won's life. Not because she was a threat, but because she was a weakness. And in this world, love and weakness were the same word. That person was already making their next move. And Chisholm's photograph, the blurry one she had taken through the rear window of Do-hyun's car, was sitting on her phone with something in it she had not yet noticed. In the background of that dark, badly parked car, a face. A face she recognized. Not from Seoul. Not from the market. Not from any of Jaewon's world. From home. Some love stories begin with a meeting. This one began with a coat given to a stranger in the rain. And everything that followed was the universe insisting that one quiet act of grace be paid back in full, in the most complicated, dangerous, and extraordinary currency available. Chisholm Olivia came to Seoul chasing a scholarship, and found something she hadn't known she was looking for. Kwon Jae-won built an empire, and discovered it had no room in it for the one thing that made him feel human. And somewhere between a Tuesday market stall and a midnight phone call, and two hands finding each other in a quiet room, two people from completely different worlds did the most rebellious thing imaginable. They chose each other anyway. Now I need you to tell me, was Chisholm right to trust him? Or is she walking into the most beautifully dangerous mistake of her life? And that face in the photograph. Someone from home. Someone she knows. Who do you think it is? Drop your theories in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you think. If this story moved you, wrecked you, or made you feel something you weren't expecting, please subscribe, leave a like, and share this with someone who loves a love story that doesn't take the easy road. New episodes drop every week, and you do not want to miss what comes next. Because the real story, it's only just beginning.